Good people, what is going on? Another episode of the All Go podcast. I'm your host, Desmond. Appreciate you tuning in. First thing, I've been off for a little bit. I have just been enjoying just some family time and haven't gotten around to posting any videos. For January, I want to set a goal for myself to do one new video every single day, no matter what, even if it's just something really quick. Um, but I do want to commit to that to do more as far as videos and stuff go, and just see what I can do with growing this channel. So that is my goal. So if you see something, hit me up, subscribe because you don't want to miss the new videos that are being posted. Um, want to start with the Detroit Lions, and then we'll get into some college football games with the 12-team playoff. We've had a couple, our first two rounds already, with the last game of the second round being last night with Notre Dame and Georgia. But starting off with the Detroit Lions, they go to San Francisco on Monday night and they beat the 49ers. I can't even remember what the score was, but it was high scoring. Our defense could not get a stop in the first half. And then in the second half, we actually got two interceptions, which really was the difference in the game. There were some conversation as far as should the Lions have played their starters or the starters that they have left, at least. And I just, in general, thought that was a ridiculous thought process that the Lions should sit their guys and just basically lose the game because and the reason being is number one, in the NFL, you don't have enough guys on your active roster to only play the backups because a lot of these guys are playing special teams. You don't have, three and four and five running backs on the roster. It's just not as far as offensive linemen go, you really don't carry that many offensive linemen. So I just thought number one, that was just a ridiculous thought process because it's not as if everyone's going to get rest. And I get it. You may say, well, rest Goff and Gibbs, a couple of your star players. But I just thought it would be a better strategy to continue number one, our offense rolling and our offense being in rhythm, because I think that's the only formula that we have this year to win the Super Bowl is our offense is going to need to outscore the other team, and defensively we're just going to need to get some timely stops and or turnovers. You look at the Chicago Bears game that we had, the last Chicago Bears game, and we end up winning that game. It was a relatively close game if I'm remembering correctly, but we had the fumble that Roma Dunze had, and then right after that, they fumbled again, which I think was also Roma Dunze. But that was our defense getting those couple stops that we need, whether it's turnovers or whether it's forcing punts or field goals. That's going to be our formula, and I think it would have been more risky to sit key players of our offense against San Francisco, excuse me, versus keeping the offense in flow rolling into that Minnesota game. Minnesota's a good team. There's no doubt about it. We're gonna have to bring our A game. We're gonna have to play well to beat them. But I don't think we could afford having a slow start offensively while our defense is just the who they are at this point. It's just the few and the proud at this moment. So I thought it would be more beneficial to keep the offense in rhythm, keep them going, because if you win the Minnesota game, you're gonna get a bye week. Like it's coming. So I thought it was an odd, even real discussion to have of should the Lions rest their guys against the 49ers. It's just not. I'm not sure how you could watch the Lions, watch Dan Campbell, see how he operates, and even in think that he was going to do that. There was no part of me that thought that was going to happen. I was looking on ESPN and all that to see if there was any news about it, but I just don't see how someone thought that would be the case that we would sit our starters. So um, for Minnesota, I feel good going into the game. like I mentioned, we're going to have to play well. We are going to need to score a lot of points. I think at this point, Sam Darnold has earned the benefit of the doubt of the assumption that he's just going to have a meltdown and throw two or three interceptions. That's probably not going to happen. I think we will need to make some plays defensively. Terrion Arnold, Robertson, who has been terrific this year. He's been terrific. We're gonna have to just cover and hold up on the back end. It was very frustrating and disheartening to see the lack of pressure we got on Brock Purdy. I mean, he was back there all day. I mean, there were so many times where no one was even close to him. He could have held the ball for another 2 seconds, and we still wouldn't have gotten pressure. So that part is concerning because that you're going to have to make a decision. Either we're going to live with bringing four and not getting pressure and trying to cover on the back end, or we're going to blitz and come and get you, which means on the back end, we are going to have a lot of one-on-one matchups where we're just going to have to win and be better, which is difficult, especially when you consider our cornerback one with Carlton Davis is out with a broken jaw. So you're talking having a backup corner or a backup corner playing on that, that other corner spot. So that part is a little difficult, but I think Aaron Glenn is going to this next stretch that we're going to have the next 4 or 5 games. He's really going to earn that paycheck, and what I mean by that is he's going those are tough decisions, and I think he's going to have to bring pressure, but he's going to have to toe that line really well, because if you get too greedy too often, then offenses can kind of scheme you up, and God forbid you get a pick route or something like that, a rub route with Justin Jefferson. He's going 60, 70 yards to the house. So it'll be a tough task, but I do have confidence in Aaron Glenn that he can get it done, and that he can find that fine line of bringing pressure, but also hanging back or playing zone, those types of things. So we'll see. But I made a video a couple weeks ago that I just think the Lions really need that one seed. I think they need the one seed because of our injuries that we currently have. I mean, we're undefeated on the road this year. And it's not to say that we're invincible or anything like that, but I have confidence in us going on the road. If we're the 5 seed and we play Tampa Bay, Atlanta, LA, I am going to assume I going into that game that the Lions are going to win, because I think we are a better team than those 3 teams that I just mentioned. Is it going to be easy? No. Those teams are in the playoffs for a reason, but I think we are better. I think our offense is the best in the NFL, and I think our defense can do enough to get some timely stops. Like basically what I just said, our formula is going to be for winning a Super Bowl. So that's how I feel. But it would definitely be extremely beneficial to have another week for some guys to get back. Khalif Raymond, I heard his 21-day window was open, so we may have our starting return man back. Anzalone, I believe the last report I saw was he may have a chance to play Sunday night against Minnesota. So we've got some guys who are getting close to getting back. So it would just be really nice to get another week for those guys to get back, and we can be as healthy as we can for the second round of the playoffs. And just quite simply, it's just one less game you have to play to get to the Super Bowl. So that is my thoughts on it. And it's kind of wild to say Detroit Lions or talk about the Detroit Lions and talk about realistically the Super Bowl. It's pretty wild. I'm 38 years old, and in my adult life, or even from what I can remember from sports and the Lions, this has never really been a realistic thing we could talk to. Now, as a fan, which is short for fanatic, yes, we think we're going to win the Super Bowl, but it's pretty wild that that is actually something that is being talked about, and even Vegas somewhat agrees, because the Lions have, I think, the second or third best odds, or the top five in odds, which we've never had that before. So really exciting stuff. So we'll see what happens Sunday night. Want to move on to just kind of the bowl games, the 12 team playoff, and I have just a couple teams that I want to talk about. Not in depth, just kind of to hit on. And I saw online, as I'm sure everyone else did too, on Twitter and whatnot, that of just the first round games and how they were just a lot of like blowouts and people were upset about it and going back and forth. A lot of SEC fans were saying, "Oh, Bama should have been in," and Ole Miss or South Carolina, so on and so forth. So I do understand the criticism because the games just weren't great. I think everybody who loves college football and enjoys watching it wants to see really good football games, and we just didn't see that in the first round of games. I thought I thought that the format of the 12 team playoff should change before the games had even happened because it was just a weird spot. Like when you looked at it, the way once the field was announced, you saw, like, I think it was Penn State, where you looked at it like, man, they have quite possibly the easiest draw to get to, the Final Four, and just their path is the easiest. You looked at Oregon, which they are the number one team, won their conference, hadn't lost a game, and their reward was to play the winner of Ohio State, Tennessee, which in that realm, you would look at, that's a pretty, at that point, it would have been a pretty darn good team that is, getting ready to play you after they play that first round game. So I thought the format needed changing before that. So with that being said, even with the criticism, the flip side of the criticism and what I would like to highlight is, and I put this on Twitter, was we had, what was that, 4 teams that we had 4 games of top, call it 25 teams. Let's say top 25 teams, regardless of how you want to rank them. We had 4 games, and we had 8 top 25-ish teams playing in those games, and we had 0 opt-outs. Like, I think that is exciting to say, and I think it's something that we've, in general or in mass, that we've kind of missed, that we haven't really highlighted or focused on with all of the criticism that has been with the 12 team playoff. I definitely think that's something that should be celebrated and uh, maybe applauded is a little too strong, but I do think that's something we should look at and just highlight, because I was watching plenty of other bowl games right around like Christmas, with some family, and you just saw so many. I saw multiple quarterbacks that are warming up, getting ready to go out to for the first drive, and you see a note there that this is their first career start because the starting quarterback, the guy who was playing all year, is either opting out for whatever the case may be, NIL. I don't really recall seeing any that were injured before the game. Like it didn't seem like any of those quarterbacks were starting because the day one starter was injured. Most of it was starting quarterback transferred out. He's in the transfer portal, not playing, so on and so forth. And while the bowl games are great experience, especially for those young guys, incredible experience for those guys, I do think most people would rather see that game with the starting quarterback for that specific team. Like I said, I'm one that I'm rarely gonna ever turn off a football game because I just enjoy football that much. I used to play a long, long time ago, so I do really enjoy watching football. So I'm not one that's going to turn it off, but I know for some people it may be, for the quote unquote casual fan who just, is not a diehard and just kind of glances at it. So I do think that's something, like you said, that we should highlight, is that we didn't have any opt outs in those games. So kind of is what it is. Um, the first team we want to talk about is Ohio State, and what in the world? I mean, they go from the Michigan game where you wondered if they forgot who half of the guys on their roster were and decided not to throw the ball to them. And the only caveat I will give them is they do have a pair of really good running backs, but nonetheless, you were playing a Michigan team that Will Johnson was out. They had multiple other guys who I think were banged up with injuries that were out on the back end, and you decide to just try to run the ball at the NFL guys that were on their team and in their D tackles. It was just wild. So to see them go from that, where they forget they have pro receivers on their college roster, to what they've done in the last two games, actually, they boat raced Tennessee and then they turn around and boat raced Oregon. I mean, Oregon did not have a shot in that game. And I was someone as even going into the Michigan Ohio State game, I didn't think that Ohio State could win it. And honestly, my main reasoning was their quarterback. I'm just not sold that if you force Will Howard to be a participant in the game where he's got to make timely throws and not just, hey, I'm winning the game and guys are wide open like Jeremiah Smith. I really don't know what Tennessee was doing. That was pretty wild. But in a kind of back and forth, a nip and tuck game where every single throw matters, I'm not sure he can be high level enough to get you to a national championship, because they still have another game they'll play in the Final Four, and then they need to win one more to win the national championship. And for me, I'm just not sold he's there. Now he could prove me wrong, and I will say, hey, I was wrong about Will Howard. But as it stands today, I'm just not convinced of that. So we shall see, but nonetheless, they have been in fuego and just lighting up the scoreboard. They're getting the ball to Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Ibuka. Their running backs, Judkins is good, Henderson. I mean, they've got the talent to win a national championship. So we will see what happens. I think the games are about a week away. I think the 9th and the 10th. So we'll see what happens there, and the games will play themselves out. Also, wanted to talk about Penn State as well. They also had two big wins. They beat who did they beat in their first round? I know they beat Penn State, or not Penn State, the Boise State team playoff bracket. They beat Boise State in the last round. Um, I don't know why my mind is just drawing a blank right now. SMU, yes, they beat SMU first round, and then Boise State in the second round. Um, I mean, the SMU game was, goodness gracious, that was rough. I think it was what, two pick sixes the quarterback threw. The game was over before it really started, and then they ended up beating Boise State, which I will say there were a lot of skeptics saying, talking about Ashton Genty and, oh, can he perform against high level talent? I think he played a pretty darn good game. I think he is as advertised. As far as being a terrific running back, I think he's a really good player. I think Boise State as a whole is just not on the level that Penn State is at. Um, but with Penn State, my kind of similar thought is I think their roster's pretty good. I'm not sold on Drew Aller. I just wonder. I wonder honestly the same thing about him that I do with Will Howard. And Drew Aller surprised me actually with his athleticism. He moves a little better than I thought he did. I mean, I thought he was a statue. He's not that. He's also not Lamar Jackson or going to do anything to that level, to that extent. But he did surprise me with being able to move a bit. But I just feel like his consistency is not where you need it to be to go out and win a national championship. That Notre Dame team they're getting ready to play is legit, is really good. I was concerned about Notre Dame. I just wondered that once you bump up in competition, can you go out and beat Georgia, for example? Because even though Georgia had a backup quarterback, I still knew that the defense was pretty good for Georgia, and a lot of it just came down to just coaching and really just the explosive plays. I mean, Gunnar Stockton, I think he played relatively well. The tough part is when you have a guy who is having his first start. One of the things that an inexperienced quarterback just doesn't have is just like a feel for the game. And especially on a couple of those like strip fumbles and when the ball's getting hit from behind, is when he hits that third step on his drop back if he's in shotgun. If you're not ready to throw it right away, you've got to step up in the pocket. And I feel like he was at the back of the pocket, where that's just kind of danger zone if any of your tackles gets beat, kind of around the circle, so to speak, as far as um, the D ends and D linemen. You just miss that feel because he hasn't played a lot of football this year, and ended up being the difference of the game. But yeah, it will be interesting to see how Drew Aller plays, and also Riley Leonard as well. But I think Penn State is going to give a heavy dose of Ty Warren, their tight end, who is terrific. I heard he was like 6'6". He maybe it's just me, but he doesn't look that tall on the screen, but he's a huge human and can move and can catch and is a really talented football player. So we'll see how things go in those final four games. So pretty excited. The last thing I'll talk about is Alabama. Alabama. Uh, Alabama played Michigan, as I'm sure you probably know, in the Relia Quest Bowl. I think that was the name of it. Played in Tampa, but Michigan ended up beating them. And Jalen Milroe just yikes. That was a similar performance to that Oklahoma game. That's Oklahoma Milroe showed up, unfortunately. And I still, he did a lot of really good things for Alabama, for the program. I think just had a very untimely poor performances, and ended up biting Alabama in the butt. It was rough. I mean, kudos to Michigan. The defense played lights out. They played pretty similar to that Ohio State game, where the defense was terrific and offense did just enough to get you over the hump and to win the game. So kudos to them. I mean, resume wise, outside of teams that are in the Final Four, you could argue Michigan might have the two best wins in college football. Maybe, I mean, you beat Ohio State, and then right after that, you beat Alabama, who some people thought should have been in the college football playoff. But kudos to Michigan. That was a big win. Some great momentum that they have going from, as I mentioned, you win the game, and then in your bowl game you beat Alabama. Bryce Underwood has went through bowl practice. He's on the team. Just a lot of really good momentum, recruits, things of that nature is going really well for Michigan. It'll be interesting to see what things look like for them next year. But if they can keep this trend going, I'd be shocked to not see them in the college football playoff next year. So we'll see how that goes. And Jalen Milroe decided to go pro. um, I Interesting decision for me personally. If I were advising Jalen Milroe, which obviously I am not, I would say transfer. There's a lot that happens behind the scenes, which I'm not saying I know what happens behind the scenes, but sometimes when a new regime comes in, there's things that are inferred or sometimes even spoken of, just long story short, like, hey, you're not going to have a spot here next year. Whether it's we're going to bring in somebody from the transfer portal, or someone already on the roster we feel good about, so on and so forth. That does happen from time to time, especially with these bigger programs. I mean, it's for Kalen DeBoer and really any head coach. It is their job to go out and find the replacement for whoever the starting player is in that specific position. So for Sharon Moore, it is his job to go out and find the Davis Warren, Alex Orji replacement. So it's not you're on scholarship, like in the literal term, but as far as the we that term just kind of used of like, oh, a guy's on scholarship. Those days are gone now. You've got to perform. You've got to be the best possible version of yourself as a player if you expect to just kind of stick around. And my suspicion would be that is what was said to Jalen Milroe. But even with that, I think if I were him, I would have tried to transfer somewhere, whether it's the ACC, at the Big 12. But I would have tried to get another year of football on film to show to NFL teams, because I just don't think he's putting himself in the best position to succeed. And maybe you could argue it wouldn't have mattered. Jalen Miller was going to be a fifth, sixth round draft pick either way. I tend to lean that I think he could have boosted his draft stock with another season of just throwing the ball better, not even down the field, because I think he actually does that pretty well. But just that intermediate to short routes, I think he could have done himself a huge favor in playing another season in college football. I mean, it's NIL. Like, you're gonna make, I don't know, would he make less than $2 million? You're gonna make some money. Let's put it that way. You'll make some money if you went to a different program. That would have been my recommendation for him. I don't think this was a great time for him to go to the NFL, but guys are going to make their decisions, and you just kind of roll with it. So is what it is. Kudos to him, and appreciative for what he did for the Alabama program. But is what it is. So that is it for me. I appreciate it. If you stayed to the end, like what you heard, please give me a like and subscribe. Would greatly appreciate it. I think I'm at about 119-ish followers on the channel and looking to grow that. So thanks again. Appreciate it. Peace.